to New Orleans because Dina wasn't there.
It's all your fault. Premed office hours for April, not August, April 9th, 2025. My name is Dr. Ryan Gray, founder of Medical School Headquarters, author of some books, host of the Premed Years podcast, all that good stuff. I'm joined by, I first apologize for my voice. I kind of lost it and I'm sick and dealing with that. Mostly because I was screaming at the Florida Gators winning the national championship in basketball, which apparently nobody cares about. They're like, oh, it's not football. We don't really care about it. So whatever. Yeah. The only D1 team to win 3 basketball championships and 3 football championships. So take that. Reverend Dr. James Scott Wright, former director of admissions at UT Southwestern's retired executive director at TMDSAS. How you doing, sir?
Doing well. Well, other than I'm kind of sick myself. So, yeah. Well, woohoo! We're a little sick crew today. But yeah, no, I'm doing pretty well, and just excited to be here and looking forward to answering these questions.
Yeah, lots of questions. Hopefully, Carlos Tapia, former director of student affairs at Icahn School of Medicine, former director of admissions at TCU. How you doing, my friend?
I'm good. I kind of want to stay away from this chat, considering both of you are sick.
We're going to send you right? I hope your computer virus software is up to date.
Right? I'm like, I need to go away.
Oh, man.
That's funny.
For those of you who are new here, think of this as free pre-med advising for the next, as my eyes are watering, the next 55 minutes or so, answering your questions with our collective knowledge. Michael says hello. Pierlemans says feel better. Roy says feel better. Oh, look at all the empathy coming through. You guys are going to be great doctors.
Yeah, right.
Caleb says, suck it up and answer my question. Caleb says, good morning. I will be retaking the MCAT in July, but will still apply using my first score. Will schools hold off on reviewing my app or sending any interviews or acceptances until they receive my new score? Great question, Caleb. Scott, this comes up all the time where students, shockingly, need to retake the MCATs, but they still want to try to get their application in, get verified. I would assume, if not just standard policy everywhere, that most schools have a policy of if there is a pending score, then they will hold off on reviewing the application. It's the application to them is incomplete.
Right. I think that's right. When you show on the application that you're going to be taking it additionally another time, then I think you're right. People will most of the time they're going to wait for that second score.
Yeah.
Or that additional score, whatever.
Yeah. So have no fear. They're not going to look at that first score and go, oh my gosh, we're going to reject you immediately. They're going to see that pending score. They're going to wait for you. They're going to give you a second chance. So that'll be all right, Caleb. Michael J., when is it that you actually send your transcripts into AMCAS, TMDSAS, and ACOMAS? A bit confused on if I'm supposed to send it once the app's open or if I have to wait for them to request it. Michael J., a wonderful question. There's confusion because it's different. At least one of the 3 is different. Texas, I think, has the smartest process. Because they don't request transcripts until you have an acceptance. They're like, hey, I'm not going to waste any people hours on you if you're not going to get into medical school anyway. AMCAS and ACOMAS, you have to send it basically as soon as the application opens because they're using that transcript for the verification process before the medical schools see a verified application. So you're confused because it's 2 different things.
Yep.
Hopefully that helps. Canella says feel better. All right. Thoughts on UK Oshner, 2 years abroad and 2 years with clinical rotations in Louisiana. Carlos, what are your thoughts on Caribbean international schools? UK Oshner is an Australian school, for those who don't know.
I mean, my honest opinion.
Yeah, honesty rules.
So I think they do a good job, right? They get students to where they need to get it starts to get a little murky when you start to think about long-term residency and I would say proving, right, that you went through the same, I would say, rigor as a LCME accredited or a US accredited institution. I think as long as your rotations are in the US, I think you have a little bit more skin in the game. But I think that's what comes to play is that rigor that all of the medical schools based out of the US have. And again, every institution is different, every country is different. But that's where I've seen the challenges. It's at the tail end on the back end of having to demonstrate that you've gone through the same level of curriculum and rigor when it comes to residency and asking you might get asked the question, why did you go the Caribbean route? Why didn't you continue to try to get into a US medical school? But some students been successful. So,
Yeah.
but it comes into question. It does come into question a lot.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was just at a conference where UK, UQ, University of Queensland, Oshner, was there, and I talked to several other Caribbean schools, and I think the good schools understand that they are Plan B, that they're not, and they shouldn't be considered a first choice. That these are places for students who just can't get into a U.S. school. And there are risks in going to international schools. The match rates are lower, and so you just have to make sure. And you also have to make sure that these international schools are not playing any games with their numbers. There are some schools that will do comp exams, they're called, where students have to take basically a practice step 1 score before being allowed to sit for the real step 1. And if they can't pass this practice step 1 score, first time, second time, third time, whatever it is the school's policy is, the student will be dismissed. And so that student will never sit for the real step 1 exam, and therefore will never count against that school's step 1 pass rate. And so you'll see some of these schools out there going, hey, we have a 94% step 1 pass rate, which is on par potentially with US schools. I don't know those numbers off the top of my head to compare them. But what they don't say behind the scenes is that they're also kicking students out before they can even count in that data set. So,
Yeah. I think a wise question for students to ask any school outside the U.S. is, what is your attrition rate? How many students do you lose that don't graduate? They came in but don't graduate.
Yeah.
And that's a key number. If they'll give it to you, sometimes they won't give it to you.
If they give you it, and make sure that it's a real attrition rate and not just students who decided to leave and not students we also kicked out.
Right.
Yeah. So just got to be careful with all that stuff.
Yep.
All right. Oh, Caleb has his empathy at the end. Thank you, Get Wilson. You're welcome, Caleb. Yi, I have to take anthropology and sociology for social sciences. Do I need to take psychology? I took AP psychology, but didn't use the AP credit, but many medical schools recommend this course. Yeah, you don't have to, unless it's required. Potentially for the MCAT, but you can self-study those. Kat Harris, regarding my personal statement, I know you have previously mentioned to try and avoid talking about previous bad experiences with doctors. However, I was misdiagnosed and my symptoms were brushed off. Scott, this is not, unfortunately, an uncommon thing that happens, and students want to talk about it. Obviously, it's the student's personal statement. They ultimately can decide to write about what they want to write about. But what are some risks here?
Well, I think the biggest risk is that the admissions committee, the interviewers, a good portion of the interviewers are doctors, are clinicians, and so you risk when you get negative, even if it was a real experience that you had, and you a lot of times students come at it, I want to do better than this. What happened to me, I don't want that to happen. And so I want it to be, better for my patients in the future. But it still kind of comes across as you're the savior of the medical community. You're going to do it better than anybody else that's ever done it. You're not going to make any mistakes and, blah, blah, blah. And that can turn clinicians off, because you indict them when you're talking about the medical community as having problems. And so I think it's very, very risky, and I think it could go badly real quick if you're very careful with how you talk about it.
Yeah. Gotta be careful there. Yeah, and it's hard because it's very easy to come across as they all sucked and I'm better than.
Yeah.
And I think it's relatively easy to talk about the experience without throwing anyone under the bus and just talking about what you take away from it.
Yeah.
Dylan, how long after getting secondary apps should they be submitted? Is it advisable to pre-write them? Carlos, Carlos, you haven't been through a full cycle with us as an advisor on our team, but you were at a medical school once that sent secondaries to lots of students, and you could just imagine all of those students getting secondaries from every other school as well. I call it the tsunami or tidal wave of secondaries that just comes for students. And we have a whole secondary essay database at secondaryapps.com as well. You have any advice for Dylan here in terms of turnaround times and pre-writing?
I think you can do a little bit of the pre-writing, right? A lot of the questions, although institutions try to be unique in the way that they ask their questions, they're all pretty similar in tone and question. You just have to be very mindful of addressing the question in each one. I will say that turnaround time should be within a week after receiving them. The longer you sit on them and the more you think about it, the more you're just delaying the review of the application. So get those turned around quickly. And it's unfortunate that this is part of the process. And I was actually having a conversation with somebody yesterday that submission of primary application is not the completion of a medical school application. There's still a lot more that is going to happen in the year, and you need to be mentally prepared for that. So when you're thinking of even creating school lists of where you're going to send your application, it's great that you're going to send it to 50 schools. But in my opinion, if you're going to do that, then you better complete 50 secondaries, right?
Yep.
To get that return of investment. If not, you're just wasting money and doing nothing with those schools. So yes, can you pre-write? But I would encourage you to do it and then submit secondaries within a week after receiving them.
Yeah, we historically have said 2 weeks. The number one thing is make sure that if a school has a specific deadline, you follow that as best as possible. And yeah, the ticker across the bottom, secondaryapps.com. It's interesting. I was talking to at the conference I was just at. I was talking to some of the faculty and admissions people at Carle, Illinois College of Medicine, and they have a very unique admissions process. Number one, they don't do interviews. Number two is they don't have essays for their secondary process. They have a portfolio that you create. And it's at Carle, Illinois is a engineering-based medical school. It's really cool. But they talked about, and I don't think this is anything secret that I'm sharing with you. They talked about how there has been a lot of other schools reaching out to them recently, asking about their secondary process, how they conduct it without the typical essays. And I think there's going to be a shift potentially, if medical schools can figure this out, a shift away from our standard essay secondary process because of the increased availability of AI. And so I think schools are more worried about students just using AI to answer all the questions and them not really getting out of the secondary essays and the secondary application process what they're hoping to get out of it, and potentially moving towards something like Carl, Illinois has. So it'll be interesting to see this cycle and the upcoming cycles if schools pivot to something like that. I'm skeptical because human nature dictates that we kind of stay in our current comfort zone, and I think that comfort zone is essays. So I don't see it changing anytime soon, but we'll see if AI pushes.
I'll add to that though, that
Yeah.
you're saying that you're skeptical. It's funny because on the residency side, AI has been used by some programs this past season, and I think they're going to go on sort of full-fledged into other programs for AI in selection of applicants for residency. And the residency process is, it's not encouraging the use of AI, but it's being very transparent. Like if you use AI to fine tune your essays or your application, make sure that it's still yours.
Yep.
So I think that's going to translate into the admissions process very shortly.
Yeah.
They're not shying away from it. So,
yeah. And I like that language, right? If you're going to use it, great, but make sure it's your essay.
Yeah.
Versus AMCAS and the other applications are like, you are not allowed to use it. Like, that's like telling someone that preparing for some essay they have to write for school, like, you're not allowed to use the internet. You have to go find encyclopedias at your local library. Like, come on, people. Like, this is just how we roll these days with technology being ever more at our fingertips.
Yeah. It'll be fascinating.
Yep. Sarah scored at 124, 131, 128, 129. I don't need to retake. I don't want to retake, but will my 124 get me screened out? So I did quick math. I think it was a 512. Is that score? 124. Scott, Carlos?
I think 124 is about the lowest that a lot of schools will go. So I think you'd be okay with the 124. It depends a little bit on what the 124 was in. The way that Sarah
is.
Okay.
Assuming she's laying it out the way that it comes out. Yeah.
Right. That's what I was wondering. And so if it's Chem Phys, if it's cars, I think some schools treat cars differently than everything else. So if cars is 124, they may treat it differently than if Chem Phys is 124.
Maybe.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Potentially, but
yeah. So theoretically, this is 124 Chem Phys, 131 cars, 128 biochem, 129 psych. So the two science sections were her lowest here, their lowest, with cars being crushed. And the 124, that first section of the day, right? There's nerves. Maybe they were rushing to get there. They woke up late, slept through the alarm. We don't know the extenuating circumstances, or maybe theoretically just Chem Phys is their weakest section. So we just don't know. Yeah. Push forward. Go for it. Michael J., do you consider a student liaison under a leadership category, basically acting as the bridge between students and a teacher, voicing questions, comments, concerns of the students, etc.? If not, what category would you classify it under? Now, Carlos, what do you think? Leadership?
I think if you write it from that leadership perspective, right, of what you did, the initiative that you took, what was your role? But if you're just writing it as like, I was just the bridge in between, and people would tell me, and I would write these up and then send them off, I would put them like as a extracurricular other. It's very hard to tell based on just this few things.
Yep. Yeah, a lot of times you put the category you want it to be, and then convince us in the writing.
Right.
All right. Roy asks, I have a 396 GPA, good ECs, including research, shadowing, involvement in school clubs, clinical exposure. I got a 505 MCAT. What are my chances? We don't answer that question, Roy. We do have pretty soon. I'm putting together, for the most part, the the math and the tech side is done, but we're still putting together a custom report after you finish it. Something called the Readiness report card, where we'll take a look at your GPA and any trends there, take a look at your MCAT score, take a look at some select activities and hours and whether you're still doing those things, and then kind of give you a report card, give you a grade in terms of where we think you stand. I'm really excited about it. I think it'll be the most accurate, so to speak. Obviously, we have Scott here and Carlos here helps contribute to it. The whole advising team helps contribute to it. People who have been at medical schools who have made these decisions. So I think it'll be a pretty well-rounded tool to use, and we'll tweak it as we go. But stay tuned for that, Roy. The tool will not give you what your chances are because it's an impossible thing to give. Andres, thank you for everything you do. Yesterday, I received a half tuition scholarship to my dream school. Your guidance was amazing throughout this whole process. I couldn't have done it without you. And
way to go, Andres. That's great.
That's awesome. Congratulations. Let me get some other people here. Snoozing. If I had a really challenging upbringing and it affected my grades, but with a good upward trend, I demonstrate through personal assignments and extracurriculars, helping me become better. Is this okay? Scott, this sounds like the perfect opportunity for that other impactful experiences essay on AMCAS or on the TMDSAS application, the optional kind of anything else you want to tell me essay.
Exactly. You know, this is an opportunity for you to talk about your upbringing. Why was it challenging? Be as specific as you can, or as you feel like you want to be, and how that affected your grades and why you think it affected your grades, and then you could talk about how you made a difference and so, but yes, absolutely, 100%. This is tailor-made. Those essays are tailor-made for this very situation.
Yep. Great job. All right. I wanted to throw this up. Where'd it go? I love these super hyperbolic questions. Where'd it go? Oh, here we go. Perlman's. Are California residents doomed? I keep hearing that it's super hard to get into a medical school if you're a California resident. Any special strategies for a California applicant? So I wanted to jump in to the MSAR here. Let me make sure I share appropriately so nobody yells at me. All right. So let's bring up, I always forget to pause my workout when I come down here. Let's bring up UCSD. And if any MSAR people are watching, I would love to be able to just type UCSD and have that be a match for searching as well. But no, I got to type the whole San Diego. So if we look at University of California, San Diego, and this is random, I actually don't know what their data shows in terms of in-state, out-of-state. This is the MSAR for those who don't know. Unfortunately, it's a paid tool from the AAMC. I wish it were free. They interviewed 610 people, 4,800 applications, 108 matriculated. So it's about 2/3 in-state, 1/3 out-of-state, roughly. So these 108 people weren't doomed. These 610 people they interviewed weren't doomed, right? These classes are going to be filled mostly with in-state people. If we look at, let's look at Davis. It's one that's typically a little bit lesser stat-wise, so lots of people try to get in there. You can see their median MCAT's only 512. They're almost exclusively in-state. You can see here. Again, probably the same 4,800, 4,900 people applying, similar to UCSD. very similar interviewed number, 127 matriculated. These schools are going to be filled with in-state students. So are they doomed? No, that's just, there are a lot of pre-meds in California. But I think what also doesn't get said is there are a lot of medical schools in California.
Yep.
You're a very lucky state. You have, off the top of my head, maybe a dozen medical schools, if not more, that are not exclusively in-state, having in-state bias, but this whole like it's bad if you're a California resident, it's just impossible to get in. Like, no, there's just a lot of pre-meds in California. Your goal is to be the best pre-med that you can be and apply. Stop complaining.
Yeah, right.
and apply to University of California, Westchester, also known as New York Medical College. That's what we called it. It's all the California people coming out there, and then they go back to California for residency. All right. Michael J. Do medical school admissions focus on the undergrad GPA and undergrad science GPA alone, or do they look at updated GPAs if you did an SMP? Carlos, kind of an impossible question to answer. So you're the perfect person to answer it. King of the impossible. Advice here for people thinking about, like, how do I figure this out?
They look at everything. I'm thinking back to my admissions day, right? Like, it's sort of to what we talk about, these trends, right? We look at the journey for where it began, where it's at right now, or sort of where the tail end is, and the hope is that it continues to increase over time. And if there is a gap, right, in the GPA because it was really low, and then we see that there's graduate coursework, we hope that there's an increase in sort of the performance there to say, like, okay, we get the story, right? It's painting a picture. Can schools look at it isolated? Yes, they can. And again, right, the hope is that if you're doing an SMP, if this is the idea was to increase academic performance, that it's there, or if you're just doing a graduate program just to do a graduate program, that it stays consistent and then it doesn't take a dive. So it really does tell the story of your academic performance throughout your undergrad and through the graduate post-bac program. But they look at everything, not just one thing in isolation.
Yeah. It's such a hard question, and the standard answer that I almost always give is, depends on the school. Right? I know there was a student, I forget what school it was, but I think it was a school in Michigan, where the student struggled, but then did some post-bac work or SMP work. And I don't know if it was special because the student was a Michigan resident, or if this is just their standard policy for students doing post-bac work or SMP work, where they basically are like, we're going to ignore your undergrad GPA. We have a policy where we understand that students struggle and they were in different phases of their life, maybe, and we're just going to look at your updated GPA through your SMP. And that's what we'll consider. I tell this story all the time of, this was many years ago, and it's a new director of admissions there, but UCF, their old director of admissions, Rel, they had a policy, excuse me, where they would look at, in terms of your competitiveness for medical school, across the board, it was your last 20 of science. That was all they looked at in terms of calculating your competitiveness for UCF. And so it's, to me, right, at the end of the day, trying to figure out what a school does is just useless, right? And I say that it's kind of a hyperbolic term, useless, right? It's just a waste of energy. Your goal is to do as well as you can in every stage, and if you've struggled, move on to the next stage and do as well as you can, and prove to them that you can handle it. And the medical schools that are going to value that trend are going to value that trend. Courtney on our team came from a school where the policies at their school, they didn't really care about your trends until you were over a 3.0 GPA. If you didn't cross that 3.0 GPA line, They didn't care that your last 50 credit hours were 4.0. You were still below a 3.0. So there's all of these nuances at every school that we can't capture because it's just an impossible thing. And schools typically aren't very transparent about their policies. And then when one director leaves and another director comes in, or when the board says, hey, we want something completely different, it changes all the time. It's frustrating.
Yep.
Nor in junior in college, main thing holding me back from applying early this cycle's MCAT. Taking it at the end of May, but might need a retake. Do you recommend applying later in the cycle or a gap year? Scott, this comes up all the time. In terms of, I'm going to take my MCAT a little later. Do I still submit my application? Do I wait for my score, then submit my application? A lot of students wait for their score and then start working on their application.
Right. Which is not good.
Yeah.
Not good. Well, what I would say, Noor, is that so I'm a little confused about one thing here. You say you're taking the MCAT in May, and then you say, but might need a retake. So what's that all about?
They've already given up.
Full effort into doing well on the first go round, and don't go into it thinking, oh, this is a blow off score. I'll see what I do, or anything like that. So that confuses me a little bit, Nor. And the other thing is, so I get it that you say later in the cycle, September, if you had to retake it, then it would push it obviously back into September or whatever. There are students who apply late and get in, but that's atypical, I think. And, I would encourage you to look at a gap year, frankly. I mean, there's a lot that we don't know that would be helpful, but my experience is anytime you start trying to condense your timeline, things go haywire. So I prefer to take your time, be intentional. So plan it out so that you can take your time to be intentional and do the best you can so that first application you're submitting is the best application that you could have. So I think if you're really trying to condense that timeline, that scares me some. So I would encourage you to really start with looking at a gap year.
Yeah. Oh. Just answer this one real quick. Can DOs practice internationally? I'm interested in global medicine, but I've heard some DOs don't accept, or some countries don't accept DOs. Yeah, that's true. Some countries don't. Yep. They're constantly working on it. Is audiology assistant and EMT along with shadowing a good clinical experience? Shadowing is not clinical. Assuming I put a lot of time into them, I was thinking of going for a broad range of experiences.
Could be.
Carlos, could be. Yeah,
could be. Again, it's the substance, right? The experience description that matters.
Yeah.
Right.
What are you getting out of it?
Yeah.
And then how are you writing about it?
But I would say that it concerns me a little bit when they say broad range of experiences. What I don't like to see is a little tiny bit of superficial stuff in a bunch of things.
Yeah.
I'd rather you have a deeper experience in a fewer things than a little bit of a jillion things.
Yep. Sheena, thank you for the Q&A. Do medical school reapplicants have to write a completely new personal statement, or can we just use the previous statement and make changes with new experiences added? Scott, I think the key here is completely new.
Yeah.
I like when you're hyperbolic so we can be easy with the answer.
Apparently the word of the day is hyperbolic.
So yeah, I love that word. I'm very hyperbolic with my use of hyperbolic. And then you can say hyperbole, which is a super fun word as well.
Yes, that's true. So I think that absolutely you have to make changes to include new experiences, because one would think that over a course of a year that you would have new experiences to talk about. Now, whether you have to completely change the whole personal statement, I mean, that may or may not be true. I don't, if the personal statement's awful, then yes. But if it's pretty good or whatever, then maybe not. So it kind of depends on a lot of factors.
Yeah. Lots and lots of factors. Carlos, you have any thoughts on rewriting the personal statement?
I mean, I think it should take the opportunity to really work on it, right?
Yeah.
Show us that growth, demonstrate the growth.
I think let me add maybe the question behind the question here, which is often, if I'm a reapplicant, especially to the same school, will the schools compare my personal statement year to year?
Probably not.
Right? Maybe. Maybe not.
I mean, what they're not doing, I think what they're not necessarily doing is having them both on the screen and going, "Oh, look, everything's the same."
Yeah.
I don't think they're doing that.
And here's where, if it were me, if I were in charge, right, put me as the dean director of admissions, I would want the tools that my team is using to be able to, because the technology is there and it's been there, right? It's been built into Microsoft Word forever to compare two documents. If the student's a reapplicant, I want a percent score of like how much has changed in this application.
Oh, interesting.
It's automatic, right?
Yeah.
The data's there. It's in our system, assuming we haven't switched systems from year to year. It's just a score. Reapplicant, 50%. Reapplicant, 100% the same. Right? To me, I'm going to probably ignore the students that are reapplicant 100% the same.
Yes.
And go look at the other people. So to me, right, I go to, is technology available to do this comparison relatively easy? Absolutely. Are schools implementing it? Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. But Scott, to your point, right? Are they comparing the two essays on the screen with their readers on?
Yeah,
doing your thing where you're leaning up to the screen, trying to read. God, wait, what's that first sentence? What's that? Probably not doing that.
Is it that obvious?
or maybe they're doing the old school thing where they're printing it out and then
yeah, that is very old school.
Oh yeah, that's so funny.
That's so funny.
Probably not doing that.
Are you saying I need to go to the eye doctor? Is that what you're saying?
Either zoom in on your screen or go see the doctor. Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. You can press Command plus and it'll like zoom everything in.
Command
plus.
Wait, where's the plus?
It's by the delete button.
I know. Oh, look at that. What was that?
And then Command 0 will just reset it.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. I learned something new today. Hallelujah. Oh, Lord.
Trisha, non-trad, 6 years in the OR. That's a lot of time having surgery. I hope you're okay. 2-time surrogate, considering putting it down as one of my extracurriculars, but not sure what to label. Surrogacy, volunteer, medical non-paid, definitely not medical non-paid, medical paid, definitely not that, etc. Thoughts? I'd probably just put it as other. Yeah. I don't know. Carlos, what do you think?
I mean, if it was paid, it has to be listed as paid in some form or way, right? If it's not paid and you did it out of the kindness of your heart, I would say put it as other, but it's not volunteer work.
I wouldn't put it as volunteer, yeah.
Right. There's this idea, and I had a conversation yesterday. Doing free stuff is not volunteer. Right? Like, there's a very fine line.
Yeah. So what is that line? Explain that, Carlos. What is that line for you?
So for me, volunteer community service, right? It's dedicating your time without an expectation of reward. You're doing it selflessly for improvement of your community or society. And so while this is selfless, right? You're doing this for somebody, being a surrogate. I don't know if it's, for me, the defining line in this case would be it's not giving back to your community or society. It's giving back to an individual. but that's where I define it. It has to, I think, impact your community and society for the greater good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I agree. Connor has an interesting question. We always talk about trends here, but what about a downward trend? Do I need to consider a postback if my science GPA trends downward, 393, 39, 35, 34, overall still a 3.8 cumulative GPA and 3.7 science GPA? Any concerns, Scott? They specifically say this is the science, excuse me, the science GPA trending downward.
Well, it concerns me a little bit because knowing that that junior and senior years when there's a lot of upper level science classes you're taking. And so what that says to me is as the classes get harder, you don't do as well, Carter. And so that concerns me a little bit. Now, 3.5, 3.4 are not necessarily bad GPAs, but that downward trend does concern me a little bit. I would want to look at the exact. I would look, if I was doing it as an admissions officer, I would look closer at exactly what courses you're taking, what were the grades in the courses. I would want to look at the corresponding sections of the MCAT to see kind of what that looked like. So it might generate a little bit more work on my end to review it. But I might have a little bit of concern, but I don't know if it would be a big concern.
Yeah. The one question for me is credits. The fact that they still have a 3.7 science GPA, I'm assuming this is a non-science major student, and they only have a couple credits here that are contributing to a 3.5 and 3.4.
Yeah, could be.
Let me know, Connor, if my assumption is correct, if you're still here, that it's maybe a couple classes and not a standard kind of 12 or something credits of all science. Thanks for the Q&A. Can impactful activities be non-medical, i.e. mentoring, teaching? I have one like this, but I'm concerned about being asked why not to pursue teaching instead. I'm assuming, Carlos, here that they're talking about the most meaningful activities on AMCAS, right? Can a non-medical activity be most meaningful, or will that cause some potential concern here?
No concern. You're letting us know, I think, in the application process why it is the most meaningful to you, right? At the end of the day, you're writing this, you're crafting the narrative. In essence, you have to convince us why it is the most meaningful. But it doesn't take away from the fact that you're applying to medical school, right? And you've done the work. I would assume you've done the work since you're applying.
Yeah.
So again, it's an experience isolated in itself that you took something away from it. That's why it's meaningful to you. But it doesn't take away from the fact that you want to be a physician at all.
Yep. Yep. All right. I don't know if either of you have heard me say this, Carlo or Scott, you probably have, where my most meaningful definition, I think a lot of people think the most meaningful definition is most meaningful to you as a future physician. Whereas that's not any sort of criteria on the application itself. And for me, I want you to use the definition most meaningful to you as a human being.
Yes, I agree.
Assuming you are a human being.
I agree with that.
Can't make assumptions these days. We don't know who's living among us. NR1 Yapper. I go to a top 10 university, and I feel that my coursework is extremely difficult and have a low GPA to that compared to my friends who go to state schools who have high GPAs. Will this be considered? Where's my little button here? Nope, not that one. Can you hear that?
Yeah.
Yeah. Is it going to be considered?
No, probably not.
I always say that these rankings are subjective, right? Top 10 to who?
Yeah.
Top 10 to that company that sells you the magazine.
And also extremely difficult for who? Where's the subjectivity? Who's assessing this? Who's making that consideration? And
Yeah.
at the end of the day, and again, with the students that I'm advising, was like, it's almost the so what?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, okay, good.
Yeah.
Tell us something else.
Yeah. There was a parent who's like, my kid got a D in the class and the highest grade was a 60%. I'm like, well, your kid should have got that 60% to get the A with the curve. Sorry.
Yeah.
I don't know, right? At the end of the day, I don't think schools have the time, the bandwidth. They don't care. There's no scale out there that says a 3.4 at Cornell is a 3.8 at SUNY Downstate. Right? It is what it is.
Yeah.
Good luck. All right. For those who don't know, let's put this up here. Actually, I don't have anywhere to send people yet. Let me change this real quick. MCAT. So medicalschoolhq.net, there is a menu item that says MCAT on there. We now offer MCAT tutoring. So if you're interested in potentially getting a tutor, or if you think you would be an outstanding tutor, go to medicalschoolhq.net. At the top there is a menu item for MCAT. You can check it out. All right. Let's go. Questions. Making a school list. premedyears.com/437. I keep saying I need to redo that episode. I will soon. Add it to my list. Gotta respond to Carlos and then everyone else first.
I'm first though.
You're first, definitely. You're first. I'm a non-trad who's currently in their first semester of their second degree, a 2-year degree. Should I solely focus on GPA and MCAT or try to get some clinical experience ECs during my second degree? Whew. Scott, is often a potential problem. At least our general consensus is that students who just stop working on their extracurriculars and just kind of go off and do other things, there's some potential questions that come up.
I mean, I think you need, if I look at an application and I see that there's no clinical experience in the last 2 years, you're saying this is a 2-year degree you're in, and you've been working to go to medical school for the last 2 years and you've done nothing except for go to school and take the MCAT, that's going to affect me. I'm going to look at that and think, I got a lot of other applicants who are busting their butt in clinical experiences and doing schoolwork and taking the MCAT and. So that's how I'm going to look at it.
Yeah. Okay. Oh, question for you, Carlos. How often will you upload new videos for the Med School Years podcast? Dun, dun, dun. It's a new podcast we launched. Or at least right now, it's only in YouTube form or video form. The audio version of the podcast is still being worked on.
Yeah. We are trying to record as many episodes as we can to release an episode weekly. So be on the lookout. They're coming.
They're coming. Who's the Med School Years podcast for?
It's for anybody, really. Anybody that's interested in getting into some insights into what med school life is like. We are also going to start introducing some of the hard-hitting topics about residency. Those that have been through the residency process. We actually recorded another episode of somebody that just that is in residency that went through the process. So hopefully that episode will be released soon. But it's for anybody that's interested in learning more about what med school life is like. You'll quickly realize that this journey of applying to med school doesn't stop when you get into med school.
that
keeps
light
going.
that you thought you saw at the end of the tunnel, that was just a firefly flying through the tunnel.
Yeah. Yeah. Most definitely.
Oh, yeah. So this is right. We have the Premed Years podcast for those wanting to get into medical school. Now the Med School Years podcast for those who want more information, whether you're in medical school or you just want that information now because you want to see what kind of suffering is still ahead. Yeah. Awesome. Super excited for that. All right. I applied recently for application renovation. Yeah, we just got to get back on that. The last time I looked at applications, they weren't very good. So I don't know if I've looked at yours specifically, but we'll take a look. I'll throw this to both of you. Is there any specific GPA range to look at postbacks, SMPs, master's programs?
I think some programs do have it very explicit, like what the range needs to be in order for you to be admitted into their program. So follow the guidelines. But outside of that, similar to the application to med school, you just have to present whatever as best as possible. I think special master's programs, specifically like academic builders and MCAT preparers, like traditionally meant for pre-health students, have GPA cutoffs. So just be very wary of that.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Interesting question from Derek. And Carlos, I'll throw to you. You guys mentioned research as one of the overrated things in terms of getting into medical school. My question is, would not having research impact you negatively down the line for residency? And Carlos, for anyone kind of looking at the data that the NRMP produces, the number of publications that students have, those who match, as well as those who don't match for each specialty, those numbers have skyrocketed in the last couple of years with step one going pass fail. But what are your thoughts on research and residency here?
So I think during medical school, if you're going into a competitive specialty that you know you're going to need research or they're going to want to see research on your application, then you better start doing that work as soon as you start medical school, right? Get into a lab, start working with a PI so you can build those hours. Right now, as an undergrad, it doesn't really impact you in residency terms, right? It's for your application to admission. But once in medical school, if you're going into programs that are research heavy or very competitive specialties, I would encourage you to look for those research opportunities. I've heard of students even taking an additional year in med school just to complete research because they didn't have the time. And then there's others, like the individual that we interviewed for the podcast a couple of weeks ago, that did it all during those 4 years. No break, went through. So is it possible? Yes, but you're going to have to find that balance and balance it out. But it is important on down the line in terms of med school into residency, but not pre-health into residency. That's too far back.
Yeah. Yep. All right, friends. I think we will end on that awesome question. Again, medicalschoolhq.net if you are interested in some MCAT tutoring, also one-on-one advising if you would like help with your essays, interview prep, your complete application process. That's what we do day in and day out, and what kind of supports us to come here every week and give you free information as well. Application Academy is still open for the next couple of weeks. We will soon have weekly access to Application Academy as well. We're going to test that out to see if that's beneficial for students as well. So stay tuned for that. Any parting words of wisdom, Carlos or Scott?
Keep up the good work. Don't forget to breathe.
Breathe. Oh, that's such a minor thing. Who needs that? All right, friends. Everyone take care. We'll see you soon. Bye-bye.